Good afternoon. My name is Jaidyn. I'm one of the senior teachers here at Vincent Music, and today I'm going to be giving a music lesson into how we would go about practicing some of our scales, as well as some basic hand technique. Please don't mind the noise in the background. There's a storm outside, and there's probably lots of kids outside, so please don't mind that. Anyway, one of the big things in terms of practicing our scales is how we practice them. Because yes, we can hit notes on a scale, but all in all, pardon me, I'm just going to adjust the camera a little bit. All in all, if we're not careful with how we actually practice our scales, then we might kind of know where things are, but we don't actively get the fulfilled learning of said experience of learning our scales. So, the scales that I want to work with, we'll start from the basics. We'll start from our C major scale. I'm just going to use the right hand just for the kind of ease of camera motion. But this is applicable to all hands, like left hand, right hand, hands together, contra motion, etc. So, when we're practicing our scales, with our C major, it is thankfully one of the common variants of scales where we have our, so going over our fingers very briefly, so it's one of those scales which we have fingers 1, 2, 3, and then we tuck our thumb under the change. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, when it comes to practicing our scales, the method that I like to kind of go by is, sometimes it's good to practice it very fast, but most of the time practicing, I like to think of the analogy of the tortoise and the hare. Sometimes it's good to practice very quickly, but most of the time, practice slowly. Making sure that we're relaxed while we're doing it. Because there's no point trying to have a scale where either our hands are too high, our hands are too low. We just need to make sure that we're comfortable with all the fingers touching the notes as best as they can, and just making sure that they're kind of resting there. Sometimes it's good just to gently roll your wrist around them, because a lot of times when I see beginners practicing, they don't have all their fingers on the scale. It's very easy for, just a few fingers to be on there at a time. This is the trickier method of learning it, but it is best to practice slowly and with all of your fingers on the keys. And the same goes for the left hand as well. I'll briefly demonstrate here. Making sure every note in between is very clear and distinct in between the sets. So, some of the students that I've had before have a tendency to really either go very loud and very much using all of your fingers. I would advise against going so powerfully so quickly. Some of this does depend on if we have a weighted keyboard at home, because there's some keyboards which for financial reasons you just sometimes basically have to get the keyboards that you can. But when we're practicing our scales as best as we can, if we practice loud, we need to make sure that we're not breaking our hands while we're doing it, because otherwise this will lead to injury. And when we're practicing our softs, we need to make sure that all of our notes are very hearable. In terms of some of our other scales that we might be looking at, the same process applies to all of the different scales, regardless of the different fingerings that we have for some of them. I try not to think of the words. Because obviously we have scales which will have different fingering. For instance, such as our F major. For our right hand, it is set with there's fingers 1 to 4 on each side, if we're just going up the one octave. So making sure that when we're practicing, whether it's softly or loudly, we're making sure that we can hear our notes clearly and that we're not blurring them. Because when we're starting, it's very easy to blur our notes together, particularly when we're trying to get a sound out of an acoustic piano. But it's best if even if we're practicing slowly, that we just make it all smooth one note flows neatly into the other as best as it can. So, in terms of how I would go about, practicing my scales, because yes, there are the notes, but also what about things such as our posture? The way our hand is kind of setting on the keys. So for instance, if I'm on F major, right? If I wanted to adjust a piano stool, if there's an adjustable piano stool that you have, then that makes it a lot easier to practice some things. Because sometimes you'll have chairs which, I'm just going to do a bit of a demonstration here, but sometimes you'll have chairs which are simply too high, and that's going to make your hand kind of naturally go up. While everything will be touching, it's like in order to kind of go down, you have to kind of bring your hands down to compensate. So that when we're back actually sitting down, we find that our hands are actually more tense, right? So say for instance, if I was just sitting in a random kind of chair which wasn't quite suited to my posture, and then I decided to kind of sit down, then see the difference that my hands have. I can still technically play the scale, but it's not very comfortable. So, when we're practicing our scales, as best as we can, we'll see, even if we need to use a few cushions, let's see if we can find a few cushions, or otherwise, like find a small chair, and see how we go with that, and just make sure that we're sitting nice and comfortably as best as we can. And it's okay if we don't get it right the first time. It's gonna take a while, but it's always good to practice. So when it comes to going about the scales, whether it's just the right hand, sometimes it doesn't matter if we're loud or soft, but when it comes to figuring out where our fingers need to go, with F major, for instance, this uses fingers 1 to 4 only. We do not use our pinky finger. So if I'm using fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for F major only, well not necessarily F major only, but in this case, I'm just going to use my hands as an example. We take this finger out. It's just fingers 1 to 4, okay? So with F major, we need to make sure that we're very cautious about where we're going. We move our wrist to match where our fingers are going in order to prepare us for the change after the 4th finger. Now with the left hand, it's a bit of a cheeky one because the left hand is actually just like a C major scale, in that it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. We use all of the fingers, but with the right hand we just use the 4. We only use fingers 1 to 4. The reason is because if we try to do our ordinary kind of F major, I'm only going to use my wrist up as an example. Do not do this. Just don't do this otherwise. But the only way you'd be able to get that cleanly is if you were to tuck your thumb under here. But then the shoulder is raised, and if we're making tension on our shoulder, that's not a good thing because otherwise it affects our playing, and above all, it hurts after a while. So the approach that I like to take within learning scales is injury prevention. Because unfortunately, I've had injuries myself over the years, so long, hard lessons there. It's keeping an eye on the time, pardon me. So, whether it's learning a particular scale, whether it's C major, overall, we need to keep our fingers on our keys when we're learning, as best we can, and keep good posture, not just your physical posture, but your hand posture. And we also need to make sure that we're not going too loudly when it comes to playing the keys. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and take care, alright? See you.